It is my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a former federal prosecutor, U.S. Assistant Attorney General, and current candidate for L.A. County District Attorney. You can get him online at nathanhochman.com and follow him on Twitter at nathanhochmanDA. Nathan Hochman, welcome.
Great to be on the show, John. Thank you.
Likewise. Let's start out with a new poll that was just released. It was a poll that was commissioned by your campaign for your race for district attorney that showed George Gascon in big trouble. Not just big trouble in terms of his approval rating, but when you ask voters if they plan on voting for him again, the incumbent was in the teens. When asked who you support to be the next district attorney of Los Angeles County, you came in second place and would be the most likely candidate to end up on the November ballot with George Gascon. And the poll also suggested that if it's a one-on-one matchup, George Gascon is in big trouble in November. Do you believe the results of that poll are accurate?
I do, John. And the reason I believe them is that poll echoed polls that have been going on since the recall election of summer of 2022. The George Gascon, because of his blanket pro-criminal policies that have made us significantly less safe, that have led to rampant crime, homelessness at epidemic levels, fentanyl poisonings, killing more 18 to 35-year-olds than anything else. Because of his failures of his policies, he has been the most unpopular politician in all of L.A. County, which says something. And he's extremely beatable. And I bring basically 34 years of criminal justice experience as a federal prosecutor, a U.S. Assistant Attorney General. I've led 2 major international law firms, government investigations practices. I've been the president of the L.A. City Ethics Commission. And basically would bring back accountability on day one. It's almost sad to say that we have created a situation in our criminal justice system where accountability is actually something that gets questioned as opposed to a given assumption of how the system works. But I will bring it back on day one.
One of the things that does worry me about George Gascon, and look, I do believe that his failures have cut through the noise in ways that it's very difficult to do in Los Angeles in this day and age where we have stimulation overdose everywhere we turn. We have our smartphones, we have Wi-Fi, we have our computers, we have access to unlimited amounts of information. And because of that, so many of our particularly local elected officials are just under the radar. They're not on anyone's radar. People just are checked out. They're not paying attention. I think with George Gascon, it's different. I think his failures are on people's minds more so than, let's say, the mayor or the board of supervisors or other elected officials. But that being said, he's going to have 2 huge advantages when he runs for re-election. 3, actually. One is the power of incumbency. Incumbency, even for damaged politicians, always means something. The second thing is he's going to have the full throttled support of the Democratic Party. And in a county that's as heavily Democratic as Los Angeles is, that means something. And the third thing is that he is going to have unlimited amounts of George Soros money the same way he did the last time. What do you make of those tools that he will definitely have in his belt?
Well, let's deal with it one at a time. As far as the incumbency, I think the last election in 2022, the best precedent to see what's going to happen with Gascon is what happened with Villanueva. Now, obviously, since he didn't have the Democratic Party support, but what he did in attacking Robert Luna is he basically said Luna was a lifelong Republican. He was a Democrat. He said that Luna basically wasn't up to the job. And that was his attack. And what Luna did in getting through the primary is that Villanueva had gotten 35% of the vote. On the day after the primary, Luna inherits the entire 65% of the vote. I think that's as basically an anti-Villanueva vote. I think you're going to see that with Gascon. That each one of the challengers have already said publicly that if one of us gets through and Gascon's on the other side of the ballot, every single challenger will support the one that gets through. So when I get through on the March 5th primary, the day after that, assuming Gascon gets the 30 or 35% he's polling, I'll have a 65 to 70% lead over him on that next day, my election to lose. And as far as it goes with the Democratic support, look what happened with Mayor Bass. She held a press conference where she, not Gascon, she organized an organized retail crime task force, invited all of law enforcement, and completely snubbed George Gascon, not even inviting him to the press conference. I don't think you're going to see that solid wall of Democratic support that he got in 2020 showing up in 2024. And as far as the money goes, we've actually set a fundraising record so far. My campaign has at over $1.3 million, and half the money is coming from Democrats and independents because they, along with Republicans, are completely fed up with the way George Gascon's pro-criminal policies have basically endangered their neighborhoods, where they don't feel safe for themselves, their parents, their kids, to go out at night, to go to parks, subways, streets, neighborhoods, communities. I mean, it has gotten so bad that, as you said, it is cutting through the noise, and the polls are basically very clear that even with the sort of negatives he wants to bring up about my campaign, he loses by 15 to 20 points in a head-to-head matchup.
One of the things that drives me crazy, and some of your opponents in this race use this terminology, certainly George Gascon uses it, Gavin Newsom uses it, different politicians up and down the state use it. They say that what they want for criminals is quote-unquote accountability. And accountability to them and to me means they're just checking a box. It doesn't mean you're correcting bad behavior. It doesn't mean there's punishment. It means you're just checking a box. Catch and release. We check the box. So therefore, they're being held accountable for their actions. But you're not modifying their behavior. You're not changing what they're doing with their time. And because of that, you just get more crime. In the 1990s, a lot of politicians, including Democrats, Gray Davis, I would certainly say this applies to, had no problem saying, if you break the law, if you're a criminal, you need to go to jail. That's something that very few people say these days. Do you have any hesitation at all, if elected, saying that criminals need to go to prison?
No hesitation at all. If you break the law, not only what I mean by accountability is that we'll actually apply the law and to the facts that are present. And if it shows you're guilty of the crime and that crime requires state prison, you're going to go to state prison. And we're not going to do what George Gascon has done and turn our heads away from certain criminals and certain crimes and pretend that they actually don't exist when the reality shows and the evidence, more importantly, shows that the crimes were committed. Again, I think accountability for a George Gascon type person who has never personally prosecuted a criminal case in his whole life is a check, as you put it, a check the box accountability, where he hopes against hope that if you release violent and serious offenders before they serve their full sentences and you don't prosecute them to the full extent of the law in the first place, that somehow our community is going to get safer rather than significantly less safe. I think he came to office with these sort of promises, these hopes and prayers, if anything, and the data has shown that they have completely failed. So I don't think the voters are going to be sort of blindsided as they were in 2020, following the George Floyd, incident, following the defund the police, following the riots in the streets, where George Gascon rides here in a white pony and says, "I've got the answer. Suspend your logic. Just trust me." Now we're not suspending logic. Now we're not trusting him. The data speaks for itself, and he will be unelected. He will be driven out of office in 2024 when those election polls are final.
What do you make of Gascon's impulse to expand the umbrella of what he regards as a protected class? And I say that because let's take the homeless, for example. He believes that we shouldn't, quote unquote, criminalize homelessness. Well, what he means by that is if a homeless person breaks into a shop and steals something from a shop, we should treat that crime differently because the person who committed the crime is homeless and, well, they don't know any better. They're just doing what they have to do to get by. But if you're the shopkeeper, you don't care who breaks into your shop. You still have to clean up the glass. You have to replace the glass. You have to replace the items that were stolen. It's a huge time suck. It drains you of your money. It makes you uninsurable. It's a huge, huge, huge pain in the keister. But from Gascon's perspective, because the person who did it is homeless, it doesn't matter that the shop got robbed. It doesn't matter that the mailman got robbed. It doesn't matter that bikes were stolen or whatever the case may be. What do you make of that impulse with what he's doing with protected class status?
I think that impulse, if George Gascon wants to go run a nonprofit to help the homeless, he should. And that impulse can probably be better channeled in such a nonprofit. But he decided to be the district attorney. He swore an oath to uphold all the laws, not just the laws that he thought were the ones that that you should follow. And I believe that again, that impulse should be for a district attorney is flat out dangerous. The district attorney's role in the homeless situation is to enforce the law. Now, certainly, you should work with nonprofit organizations so that when these people are brought in the justice system, and let's say they have a serious mental issue, you should then hopefully refer them into the care court system we now have so they can have someone appointed to deal with their mental illness. If they have a substance abuse addiction problem, hopefully, again, brought into the criminal justice system to be held accountable for the crimes they've committed. You can also work with them to deal with their substance abuse addiction, assuming that they want to deal with it. And many actually don't. But the district attorney's role has to be an important part of that calculation. And if you remove the enforcement part of it, you're letting basically the homeless, or he's got a whole bunch of other categories, juveniles, to basically turn their thumbs up at the law, to go ahead and continue to victimize shop owners, to victimize the public in a way that will make Los Angeles County unlivable if we have 4 more years of it.
We just had an incident at the Del Amo Mall in the South Bay where you had large numbers of teenagers get involved in a riot at this mall. It was clearly organized in some sort of way with social media. Police officers were assaulted by the teens. I can only imagine what George Gascon will do with these teens. Checking the box, a slap on the wrist, however you want to describe it. We've seen incidents like this not only happen at this same mall before, but we're seeing it go on all over the region. And part of what Gascon has done, and part of what Rob Bonta has done at the California Department of Justice and our state legislature, is they don't want to go after these teenagers for behavior like this. They think that giving them a criminal record or putting them in jail or doing whatever it is that you're going to do to them is worse than just letting them go out and riot at the mall. If you're DA, how would you handle that sort of situation?
Again, I would handle it almost like a parent handles it with children. You need to set fair, consistently enforced lines and make it very clear that here is the line, and if you cross it, there are consequences for your actions, full stop. When you go ahead and you do what George Gascon has done, and he did this publicly on his first day in office, he said, my office will not prosecute juveniles for misdemeanors no matter what, which is basically a blanket statement to juveniles. Go ahead and steal $950 or less, and you will not be prosecuted by the district attorney's office, no matter how many of the 900 or so deputy district attorneys believe you should be prosecuted. The district attorney has now commanded them you will not be prosecuted. That is, again, a recipe for committing crime, for incentivizing crime, for sending the exact wrong message to juveniles that in Los Angeles County, there are certain crimes you can commit and there will be no consequences. I would reverse that on day one. And we'll make sure that the lines are fair, but consistently enforced across the entire board so that no one will think that they get special dispensation or favor just because they're either young, old, in certain classes, in certain backgrounds or whatnot. We would make sure that, again, Los Angeles County is known for its fairness and its consistent enforcement, not the opposite.
Recently, we've had Los Angeles International Airport shut down on 2 occasions for because of protesters who were advocating for a ceasefire in the Middle East. Not only did they shut down the airport, they assaulted police officers, they assaulted random people who just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. This is something that will certainly or should result in a prosecution from the LA County District Attorney's Office. I won't hold my breath to see what George Gascon will charge these individuals with, but shutting down an airport is serious business because we constitutionally have freedom of movement under the United States Constitution. That's been upheld by the courts over and over and over again. Interstate commerce is something that's serious business, and it's not just people that get moved around at these airports. Goods from California are shipped to the rest of the nation. Goods from the rest of the nation and the rest of the world come to the state of California. You shut down that airport and you take away people's constitutional right to move around the country freely, and you take away people's rights to trade goods from state to state or country to country, which we are allowed to do. If elected district attorney, how would you handle it when people try to shut down the airport so they can force Angelenos to listen to whatever cause they're trying to promote?
John, well, I'm a big supporter of the First Amendment. When speech becomes conduct, obstructive, illegal conduct, that's when, again, the district attorney's office needs to take action. That's when law enforcement needs to take action and stop that illegal conduct. The First Amendment is not an unrestricted right to speak wherever, whenever, and however you want. The Supreme Court for decades has approved time, place, and manner restrictions on the First Amendment. And clearly, if you're trying to shut down an airport, or I was actually in downtown LA when they shut down the freeway, you remember that?
Oh, yeah, the 110.
The 110, and caused a huge amount of disruption to every other person because they wanted to get their voices heard. You know, if they want to shout from the rafters from their house, or they want to go on the internet, again, with legal approved methods of communicating, 100%, big supporter of the First Amendment. You want to shut down an airport, you want to shut down a freeway, you will be arrested and prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Last question before you go. You ran for Attorney General of California last cycle. You ran as a Republican in that race. In this race for district attorney, it's a nonpartisan office, but you've switched your party registration from Republican to decline the state. Why did you do that?
The reason I did is that a district attorney, unlike an attorney general, runs in a nonpartisan race. That means that my political affiliation, whatever it would be, or anybody's political affiliation, will not be on the ballot. And I believe that's a conscious decision by LA County to say that a district attorney needs to be fiercely independent. Because what gives that office credibility and trust is that the district attorney is making the calls, the balls and the strikes calls, based just on the evidence and just on the law and not some party affiliation or political ideology. That is very dangerous if you think that Democrats or Republicans are being given a leg up just because they're Democrats or Republicans as defendants, as witnesses, as targets of the investigation. So I've actually come out and said that, look, I'm going to be, if I want to run for district attorney, I want the voters to know from the beginning that I'm not going to be using a party affiliation to do anything in this race, to raise money, and most importantly, not to run the district attorney's office. I strongly encourage every candidate who's running for district attorney to also be a no party preference independent candidate.
So to be clear, this is because you want everyone in LA County to feel that they would be treated fairly without political bias, but you did not have an ideological conversion or anything like that.
Yeah, my values have not changed one iota, not one iota. But I think it's so important that people believe that the district attorney is independent, not controlled by a political ideology, as George Gascon has demonstrated, and the problems with that I've actually chosen to be effectively independent, no party preference, to send that message from the get-go that is the type of district attorney's office I would run if I am so honored to be elected to it.
Nathan Hochman, former federal prosecutor, United States Assistant Attorney General and candidate for LA County District Attorney. You can get him online at nathanhochman.com and follow him on Twitter or X at nathanhochmanda. Nathan Hochman, thanks so much for stopping by and have a very happy new year.
Thank you, John. Happy New Year to you as well.